Hello everyone, Kamal here about engines. Today we're starting this contract engine from Poland, model 2866. When it was delivered, the engine model was the 20th. The fuel pump has an electronic throttle drive with an electronic pedal, and it was 400 horsepower. We made it 420 horsepower. And our fuel pump is cable operated. Throttle. The engine is already assembled, everything is prepared. This will be a separate episode about the startup. This is an engine from a truck, and we can see that all the fuel lines are already in place here. If the engine is from a bus, then you have to come up with something here, some pipes, basically connect everything. Here we have the supply coming from the tank. This is our mesh, a coarse filter so to speak, and this is our manual priming pump, manual priming. It goes to the low pressure pump. Here we see the arrow showing the direction. The low pressure pump sends it to the filters. From the filters it comes out and goes into the pump. So this is our return line. The return comes from the injectors, the return comes from the pump, and there's one common line. Fitting goes here. I need to supply the feed line. For now, I'll run the return into a separate bottle. This is to bleed the system and see what kind of diesel comes out. So what else did I do? Additionally, I installed these supports, put in these blocks and tightened them from below with a board. I attached the board and screwed it to my tray. I also installed another one here. Board. Well. And also on this stand, the engine will go to the customer. That is, I will install all of this on the tray and fasten it with several screws in this spot. I need to screw in the mechanical sensor now. This outlet is not available here yet, so the ears are broken. When I started changing the turbo, I was turning this clamp and I ended up with basically 4 of these tabs. The supply from S fell through. It's not a major issue whether he finds a replacement. This can be sent to the customer later, for example, or to a shipping company, and so on. From this branch, air goes to the compressor, and also from this branch we have a breather installed here, gases come in, and the breather is also connected to this branch. Since we don't have it yet, we'll start without it. As seen, my newly painted turbine contrasts with the old manifolds, which I previously cleaned using sandblasting, as shown in earlier episodes. This clamp here is also new, and all the rubber parts here are new too. Now I'm pouring in the oil. I won't install the filler neck because the hose here is more than 1.5 meters long. But the dipstick is temporary for now. I'll install it so I can check the oil level. I've connected the batteries. Let's check if the starter works, if the batteries are good, and if it turns over. Let's give it a try. Alright, everything's great, everything's turning over. That's it. Now I'll pour in the oil and connect the diesel. So I've pumped about 300 to 400 grams. As you can see, the diesel is clean, but that's how it's supposed to be. With the filters in place, I'll insert the return line into the canister and attempt to start it. And now let's start the engine. So I started the engine. You can see that smoke is coming out in sync with one cylinder, smoke is coming out in sync with one cylinder, and you can see that at this joint the smoke is coming out from here. So it turns out that one of these two cylinders has a stock injector. So I removed this short manifold, and we can see that the fifth cylinder is completely dry, while the sixth cylinder is visibly wet. So the nozzle is stuck and it's pouring. The diesel is just flooding into the cylinder. Now I need to remove this injector and order a new nozzle. So if this one is already stuck, there's nothing you can do with it. The needle is jammed, it happens. I need to order a new nozzle. So now I also want to set up a camera on this side and show that when you start the engine, there's no smoke coming from the manifold, but smoke is coming out only from this cylinder. In general, lately there have been more and more issues like this from the fuel system guys. So even with this engine, there have already been two issues. First, they had a problem with the pump, and that's just with this engine. The 10-cylinder engine I had in for repairs, the customer also complained about the fuel pump. Then there was an engine from Yekaterinburg, the 2086 series, and there it was even worse. So I didn't start it the first time. I thought everything would be fine. We gave it to the customer, and after some time he calls me. He installed it in the vehicle and he can't start it. It won't start. I initially thought the pump was off by 180 degrees a half rotation. After switching the pump by 180 degrees, the engine still wouldn't start. So in the end, what did we do? We took it off again. The customer took the pump somewhere in Yekaterinburg and they put it on a test bench. The timing marks are shifted entirely onto the vane, installed randomly. Does that ever happen? I just don't get it.
Let's take a look. There's no mark. Let's turn it until the mark appears. There it is, it appeared.
So that's 190 at 110 degrees. That's incorrect. The wrapper is standing, indicating they marked the points for him on the stand. He initiated and set it up. So why am I telling you this? Because it turns out that the weakest link for me is the fuel equipment. There have already been cases like this with the fuel equipment before. So this is just another one. I don't even know which number it is anymore. We've already changed the company. We take it to a different place now, but still, it doesn't really make much of a difference. Ultimately, it's the clients who call me questioning the issues with the fuel supplier. Nobody contacts the fuel supplier directly. They all reach out to me, asking why these problems are happening. And what can I say? I'm not the one doing all this, so what's the situation with us? So, the injector has been fixed. I already installed it back in place, tightened the pipe, connected the return line, basically put everything back on the breather, primed the fuel so everything is ready, and I also connected the batteries. Now we're going to try starting it. I haven't installed this part of the exhaust manifold yet. We'll try to start it first, and if everything goes well, then I'll put it back in place too. What else do I want to say? You could see that exhaust gases were leaking from this connection right here. I want to show that the sealing here is done with these kinds of rings. It's kind of like an oil scraper ring on a piston, a set of so-called noodle rings. These rings often get so stuck that they become completely immovable and can't be budged at all. I've tapped them, heated them, sprayed them, I've tried everything. Usually it's impossible to move them as they get stuck, seize up, or burn in. So what did I do? So I sawed through one side with a metal hacksaw, basically made the groove a bit wider and loosened up those rings. I loosened them up and now we should have a seal. Before installation I'll coat these rings with my ceramic paste. Alright, now we start it up, check that the injector is working fine, put the manifold on, and the engine will run for just a couple of minutes. What else? I also want to say if the manual priming pump works well, then the system bleeds without any problems. You don't need to loosen anything anywhere. You don't need to pinch anything or anything like that.
So I just lifted the diesel fuel from a meter height, primed it, both of my filters were empty, I didn't pour diesel into them, I primed both filters.
I also completely filled the entire pump, got all the air out. I collected about 400 grams of diesel in the bottle, and I pumped all of it without any problems using this manual priming pump. So, why am I telling you all this? I had a video about starting the 501 engine in the pit, where I couldn't prime the system. Even from a height of 10 centimeters, the little pump wouldn't pump. If the manual priming pump works well, any system will get primed. If the manual priming pump is crap, no matter what you pinch or unscrew, you just won't be able to pump the diesel. That's just a brief explanation about priming the system. So now we see that everything is fine, the engine is running great, the pressure is good, it's showing 8, but when it heats up, the pressure will drop, that's normal. So the engine is running, it's running smoothly. Well, basically everything is great, everything is fine. Now I just need to get it ready for transportation. So here I need to put the original starter back in place, remove the batteries, install the protection here, put on new belts, install the fan, and so on. We'll handle that later. I was asked to mention the repair cost. I'll briefly mention it now, meaning the information I have is approximate, give or take about 10%, so I'll share the data I have. 425,000 rubles were spent on spare parts. What was the most expensive item? The piston group was the most expensive item at 105,000 rubles. The turbocharger, costing over 40,000 rubles, was the second most expensive item. Also, our most expensive spare part is the complete compressor. The two-cylinder compressor cost about 60,000 rubles. The camshaft cost 65,000 rubles. Pretty much it. We also bought some spare parts during the repair process. For example, rocker arms, new valves, by the way the valves aren't cheap, a power steering pump and so on. Also, for example, the paint isn't included in the calculation, this paint, that paint and so on. And so on. That's the small stuff, yeah. So I think you can safely add another 75,000 rubles and roughly speaking, that's about what we get. 500,000 rubles were spent on spare parts. Next, the labor. 100,000 rubles were spent on labor for this engine. This amount includes all the machining work on the engine block. Line boring for the main bearing seats, resurfacing the cylinder head mating surfaces, machining the cylinder block for sleeves, surface grinding the cylinder heads, working on the valve guides, and piston work are all included. So these 100,000 also include the cost of my labor, plus what I pay for renting the workshop. So, basically, all the work that was done on this engine cost 100,000 rubles in total. We have 500,000 rubles for parts and 100,000 for labor, totaling 600,000 rubles already. Plus, then there's the fuel equipment. That means another fuel pump was purchased for 50,000 rubles. The injector was repaired and the nozzles replaced. This involves inspecting and tuning the pump, replacing nozzles, adjusting injectors, etc. So, the entire fuel system cost 75,000 rubles. That includes the price of the pump, the nozzles, and the labor. So, the total came to 675,000 rubles. That means 675,000 rubles is comparable to the cost of repairs. For instance, I owned an OM 501 engine. There, the video also cost about the same amount. I'm mentioning the amount of 500,000 rubles, but there too, I didn't mention some parts that were bought during the repair. In the end, it's about 675,000 to 700,000 rubles. But if you also add the cost of the engine itself, yes, the engine itself was purchased by the customer for 450,000 rubles. So now the total comes to 675 plus 450, that's 1,120,000 rubles. The customer spent 1,125,000 rubles on this engine. I believe there will be more expenses to come. It will still need to be transported somehow, plus it will need to be installed, something will have to be purchased, some work will need to be done, and so on. I want to address a recurring comment suggesting that Krylov's troubles stem from trying to save money. Frankly, I don't see the relevance of this remark in the present context. So, what does Krylov have to do with this here? The client actually purchased the costliest engine, likely out of all available engines from this brand, hoping for a good engine with minimal repairs needed. When the client reached out and described the situation, I also believed the repairs would be minimal. I planned to disassemble it, clean it, and replace some gaskets and piston rings. However, it turned out completely differently. So, I think here, you need to ask the seller why he sold such an engine for that amount. Ask the seller if he has any conscience, and so on. But you shouldn't have any complaints against the customer. The wing was getting splashed, so while I was talking, the engine cooled down. Even the manifold is already cold, completely cold. I'll now start the engine again for just a minute or two at most. It'll run for another minute and a half or two, and then I'll start getting it ready for transportation. Let's go. That wraps up the engine startup series. Thanks for watching, best of luck to all, and farewell.